This is the Wisconsin Lighting Lab WiLLcast. My name is Adam Rupp, and my guest today is Mike Selner with Muza Metal Products. Muza is a 91-year-old metal fabrication business out of Oshkosh, and Muza serves a variety of markets, doing metal fabrication and electrical mechanical assembly. But Mike, let's dig in. Tell me a little more about Muza, and then what you do within the organization.
Sure. We're located up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Been in the industry for 91 years, as you mentioned. Started by Leo Muza Sr. Moved to the current location over on 606 East Murdoch back in the mid-50s and continued to build the business around stamping primarily. Throughout the 90s, we saw considerable growth and transition to soft-tooled fabrication rather than that hard tool aspect. Through additions of lasers, 8-axis press brakes, things of that nature. Also added powder coating at that time, tube fabrication, things along that full value added.
And Mike,
aspect.
you actually started out on the shop floor.
I did.
Correct? Yeah. So you've seen an evolution in manufacturing technology over your tenure there. But how, you mentioned some of the new machinery and investments that Muza has made. But what's a good example of how far metal fabrication has come over the last few decades?
To jump right into that, you think about how often you'd use a shear back 20 years ago. Current state is our shear runs maybe 5 hours out of the day, if that. Everything is processed through laser turret combination machines, lasers as well, so full automation, things of that nature, running through really to streamline the velocity process.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. And I think as we kind of were talking before the podcast, when people think sheet metal, they think, in some cases, simple parts that are made, but the manufacturing technology and process that goes into it, and the automation, the robotics. I've been to your facility many times.
Sure.
It's a pretty impressive process. And as far as some of the machines that you guys have invested in the last couple of years, what types of technologies do those machines use?
Again, a lot of automation,
Yep.
A lot of offline programming. So really trying to decrease that indirect time and increase the green light time on our machines, right? It helps out with quality, helps out with production, the velocity, as I mentioned. Also, you walk through our shop, it's set up a little bit different than most fabricators are. Our shop is set up, 50% batch manufacturing to handle some larger assemblies that we do in weldments, and then also a cellular aspect as well. So that's very important to understand because we do have those options where you're talking low to high volumes.
And what do you mean by batch manufacturing?
So if you're taking a product and running it through one laser, a turret, say, in the blanking process, then it would have to go back up on a shelf in batch manufacturing, right?
Yep.
And then brought back down onto a forming machine, a press brake, over to a Hager, things of that nature. Go through every process individually, where a cellular process is going to be set up to run right through a blanking equipment, right into a press brake, into a weld cell, and then straight down to paint assembly. So really giving an example, we've done projects in the past where in batch manufacturing we get 15 to 16 done in a 10-hour shift on a larger assembly. It was kudos. We were doing a great job years ago. Current
Yep.
state, same business line, we're producing between 60 to 80 in a 10-hour shift, and that's going straight down to paint through our assembly lines.
In terms of that kind of manufacturing, automation, innovation, how much of it is driven by your customers demanding certain technologies over time, and how much of it is the technology companies, so your vendors, your machinery companies? What is that balance, and what has really propelled you guys over the last few decades to continue to automate things?
Well, as you grow, you want to target customers that are leaders in their industry, so that you'll grow with them, right?
Yep.
That challenges you to be a better business partner and make some of those decisions to bring the automation in and new technologies and staying at top of that bell curve,
Yep.
if you will. It's extremely important that you're metering your growth.
Yep.
And to enter that new technology is crucial. The lot sizes years ago, you could run 5,000 1 week, and that was good for a month for the customer.
5,000 parts?
Correct.
Okay.
Just say in a general componentry
Yep.
style, right? And that was good. The customer would hold that inventory. Those days are gone, and the customer wants the inventory just in time, which is the same process that we handle with our steel and things of that nature, right? So it makes sense to increase the velocity and not have that whip on the floor. Just from a general speaking, it's extremely important to transition, your substrate into a sellable product.
So you guys want to go from sheet metal to finished part as quickly as possible.
As we can.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
And we have made huge strides within the 20 years that I've been with Muza, but we're still pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
And that's important. I love to see that. My background in operations, I love that part of the business. So jumping into sales 5 years ago was kind of a hard decision. I love what I do from the sales side, but I also love the manufacturing. So, it still interests me, still in my blood, right? So I love getting out to the floor and understanding how things work and bring that out to our customer base.
Well, and that makes you a great salesperson, having that.
That's what they say, right?
The ops background and understanding really the full circle of how you go from sheet metal to finished part. I think that's important. So one of the things that I think a lot about, and one of the things I've enjoyed learning over the last decade, kind of being in manufacturing and engineering, is really how the supply chain works. And you have on one end of the supply chain, you have miners that are literally extracting particles out of the ground. They get sent to processing plants, and they get turned into metal blanks or ingot, or it could be sheet metals of some kind. I'm sure there's a couple processors in between, but really when it comes to manufactured goods, you guys are kind of you guys are the first step in the process. For a company like us or another company that's making an actual finished good. But what is that process in the supply chain look like? You guys are taking steel blanks and aluminum blanks or sheet metal and stainless steel and really forming them into parts.
Right.
And then you had mentioned soft tooling versus different types of tooling. What does that mean? It's a more nimble manufacturing process, or what is that kind of high level workflow where you guys between your suppliers and then between your customers?
Correct. Yeah. You look at the hard tool. Let's cover that one first. The hard tool and the soft tool. So hard tool is basically your stamping process. So something that if you have a part that you're going to need 400,000 of, chances are you're going to end up hard tooling it because it just makes more sense. It'll be a higher tooling cost up front, but you'll be able to keep the part cost down.
Okay.
Where soft tool manufacturing, what we do, is more interchangeable. It's more versatile. We can switch out jobs, and your setup reduction is huge between there, right? So it makes sense from that aspect. But it's important to note there's a certain application to understand that the customer and us being their partner, we have to go through that application design and understand how it's used.
Sure.
Right? We've had instances where customers will come to us with a huge quantity demand and say, that's great, we can do it. However, you might be able to have that tooling, absorb that tooling cost and have it stamped out at a cheaper price. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can look at the rest of the assembly that goes into if it's a weldment or such, right?
And have you guys seen, as you've gotten much better on the automation side, or as the industry has, do you see that dynamic shifting where you can actually start to compete with some of the stamping processes or other kind of hard tool processes? Or do you see, I'm sure there's some type of a quantity intersection where more or less it's 6 or 1/2 dozen. You could go hard tool or go soft tool, but as you guys have become more automated, do you see that curve shifting at all?
It has over the years. There's always going to be the competition from the stamping side where they're just going to need a part that's not going to change. Where we are effective and we can compete pretty hard with are the aspects of design changes, right? So
yes.
If this is going to get tooled up on a first rev and then it's spit out and it has a high probability of changing, then you definitely want to go soft tool, right? It makes more sense. You can change the setup rather than spending another $40,000-$50,000 on a hard tool. Yeah.
So. And one of the things awesome about you guys is, from a product development standpoint and engineering standpoint is, very often when you launch a product, that's not the final configuration of the product. So there's going to be, and you really don't, and I think as fast as technology changes over in different markets now, you really want to have some flexibility in the first few months of launching that. Mm-hmm. And, we've always tried to be really nimble with our product development as we get information from the end markets, from our resellers, it's really nice to be able to incorporate that in the design process.
Right.
So back to that, value-added engineering, the soft
huge.
tooling process, that's huge.
It's really, it's all about sitting down with the end customer and the engineers.
Yep.
Oftentimes the sales function, my function, we'll make the connection with the two engineering teams from both sides, and we'll kind of be the liaison, if you will, and
Yep.
get the teams talking, right? But engineers don't care to talk to salespeople, and I totally respect that 100%. I think it's important to get the teams talking.
Yes.
That can take the waste out of the process, and you have to look further past that, the design application, and see how they're actually assembling it, in their product line.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes,
Yep.
what an engineer would like to see, one, they might be building it out of unobtainium, right? And it's really hard to find, right? So
a good
things
term.
like that. So,
Yeah.
but substrate that is hard to find,
Yep.
and you have to give those options for them to understand. Hey, this is a substrate that's hard to find. Here's another option that's half the cost and is readily available.
In your role, it's aside from the sales side of it, there's a business development component, and really kind of an application engineering component as well, where you're sorting out design processes and product development processes
Right.
pretty early in the process. And I know
Absolutely.
with volume manufacturers, ideally they want to produce one SKU as much as possible, but as
Right.
as I mentioned, the way the world is going, customization is key.
It
So, aside from the manufacturing value add, what other types of development and design value add or prototyping, or could even be on the quotation side, being able to get
Right.
people, quotes back quickly? What are you guys doing from a support standpoint?
So, years ago, we'd run, like I said, like 5,000 components a week, right?
Yep.
That business has changed. 20 years ago, about 20 years ago when I joined Muza, we were running components left and right. A little bit of value added.
Yep.
Now we're more interested in taking a look at that component. That's great. We can do that.
Yeah.
But what does that component go into, right? Whether it's welded into it, whether it's fastened into it, how can we help provide an end solution that's going to be the quickest transition for our customer to put their technology into it and ship that out, and for them obviously to collect a sale on
Yep.
it. So that's important. From the support roles, we have a prototype division that supports our customers' need as well. I know that's separate, 100% separate from the rest of production.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the beauty of it. I always joke around again, but engineer to engineer contact. After sales makes the contact, they discuss the project. Oftentimes it could be a web-based platform that they're going back and forth on, sharing designs through SolidWorks models, things of that nature, but it's really about increasing that velocity.
Mm-hmm.
So we can get a prototype in their hands, and they can tear it apart, analyze it, and then go through a second iteration. If we know that it's going to go into production at that time, we'll put the resources behind it to develop fixturing for welding or whatever the process might be. But that's something that we added back in about 2008, and it's we did it for one specific industry, and the rest of our customer base found out about it, which was great. We weren't really marketing, so now within the last year here, we're starting to push a little bit more marketing that prototype division. So,
And are you making? And you said it was separate from production, but do
It is.
you small runs of production parts out of that, or
if needed, we
If
can.
needed, yeah.
And that's mainly on off shifts, but
Yep.
primarily you're looking at the machines in that area being utilized for that prototype area along with the engineers. So those engineers are dedicated for that area. They also do the costing
Mhm.
of any projects that come in. They do the planning and the programming for that department alone. So then there's 3 or 4 individuals that work out on the
Oh,
floor
wow.
that are craftspeople. I mean, all
Yeah.
of our folks at Muza are craftspeople.
Yeah.
They're key in what they do in each process. So that these folks are able to program on the fly if need be. Now, if it's something complex, we can shift it right downstairs to our offline programmer for the press brakes or for robotic weld as well. So we have those options from a prototype standpoint where if we need to run a virtual model of, say, a forming application, if it's going to collide with our machines, what tooling options we could use, we can do that at the napkin stage. We don't necessarily have to form a sheet of metal and waste material in that aspect. We can do it virtually before it even hits the machine.
So from a design and engineering skill set, when you guys are doing recruiting or looking for new members for your engineering team, it sounds like it's it's similar to us, where you really want a kind of a Swiss Army knife of skill sets. Right. People that are hands-on, people that can build things, but also can use SolidWorks and some of the other design programs. And I don't know how many details you can get into, but what type of softwares do you expect people to be familiar with when you expand your engineering team?
Well, first of all, I want to back up a little bit, because we want to look at the culture, right, and make sure that we're hiring for culture.
Absolutely.
And putting people in the right spots, right?
Yep.
We want somebody that's going to advance throughout the company and advance within their position. And the current position, that we want them to be able to put their all in, right?
Yep.
And be able to do their best job at their current position to put them into the next light to transition. So
yes.
75% of our current support staff came from the shop floor.
Wow, that's awesome.
One point. And we have folks from 20 years to myself, 5 years up in the support staff.
Understand the nuts and the
So
bolts, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's really key, especially in our industry, understand what we can do with our technology, but even more importantly, what we can't.
So when you guys are developing your culture and your skill set, you need to plan out several years. Because
Yes.
you may have somebody that I'm sure there's always a certain percentage of people that more or less might transition to the office, but if you want to maintain that pipeline, you got to be thinking out years in advance.
Right. And if you would have asked me 18, 19 years ago if I'd be doing sales, I would have laughed at you, right? I mean, I was a true blue fabricator. I love that stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but you take hold of every opportunity that you have.
Yeah.
And that's something that we look for. We look for those folks that want to continue learning and want to challenge, and are at work every single day, putting in a solid effort and really just growing, and that's a huge point of it. And from an engineering standpoint, our engineering manager has 20 plus years with us. He was actually my supervisor. So you look at those transitions and those folks that are willing to go back for more training, additional schooling, things of that nature. It's huge, and you build your culture on those folks like that. Very important to understand that.
So back to the software side of things, if you can get into that, are you guys all in with SolidWorks, or do you use other design programs, or what?
Primarily SolidWorks from a design side, the most current platform. However, we do use some vendor-based programming for our technology that's on the floor.
And vendor-based, is that your machines?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So when you're talking about primarily, we have Amada equipment.
Yeah.
We did bring in a piece of equipment, our panel bender Prima Power 2220 this year. So those all have offline programming capabilities. So we're able to do some of those more complex forming operations on our floor.
And do those get programmed? So they do get programmed on the floor, or does that start in the office?
That starts in the office.
Oh, yep.
So gone are the days where we'd have 14 press brakes lined up,
Yeah.
and we had 3 of them chugging away on new product development or revisions, things of that nature. Everything is going to be redone on a revision or laid out from a start standpoint before it even hits the floor. So that's our end goal, obviously, to keep your green light time up and keep those machines moving.
Keep moving, yeah.
Right, exactly. So we had a lot of waste back in the day on that before that technology came out in the early 2000s. And when it came out, we grabbed it and kept rolling with it.
So what about the? I know one of the things we wanted to get into was some of the skill sets on the shop floor, and kind of not necessarily your recruiting process, but there seems to be a trend in manufacturing where there's not as many people getting into it as there used to be. And my dad talks a lot about this, and in his generation, I look at all my my uncles and my aunts and extended family members. Everybody was a machinist or a metal fabricator or a mechanic or a contractor, and Wisconsin is very hands-on in general, but there seems to have been kind of a retreat from some of that. Do you see that coming back? What are some of the trends you see just culturally in Wisconsin with people that are getting involved in manufacturing?
Well, it's important to understand that as generations change, kind of the expectations do, right? So when I was growing up, it was always a 4-year education. You have to go get your 4-year degree. It worked great for my sister. I wasn't one of those guys, hands-on, right? So it's important to understand how you learn, how you're visual learning, or you can pick up a manual and understand how to operate a machine. So we really have to, as area, as a region, invest with our Fox Valley Tech and technical colleges, right? It's extremely important. Moraine Park, another
Absolutely.
one. They have some great programs for welding as well as press brake, right? Running through those programs from a 1 year to a 2 year degree, and even some of the boot camps that they hold. That's huge, taking the non-traditional student like myself, moving through those programs and getting that skill set. And you can still earn a really good living going through those programs,
sure.
Coming out with an on-job experience, right? I'm a graduate from Fox Valley Tech myself, went through a supervisor management course at the ripe age of 30, right? So I had no intention necessarily when I started years ago to go back to school. I had a little bit primarily before coming to Muza, but really those opportunities that were out there helped me close that that gap that I had in skill from the supervision and operations management side. So kind of translates into the sales side. But when you're talking about building your next manufacturers, you almost want to start, and we do a pretty darn good job of it, start out even at the middle school level.
Yeah.
And getting into those middle schools and talking about manufacturing and having them come through and tour our shop floor and understand that manufacturing isn't down and dirty and dingy like it used to be, you know, and it's important for the younger generation. And those guys, I have a 8th grader, excuse me, and she's already working with Inventor, you know, on a 3D platform through their tech program at a middle school. So that introduction to technology that we're going to use in the manufacturing sector is already being done at that level. So it makes sense to partner with some of these school systems and bring them in, tour them, let them know that there are options. And it might be starting out for a welder and then transitioning to an engineer and working through a CWI process, things of that nature, but really giving them opportunities and make them realize that manufacturing doesn't have to be, isn't conceived as being dirty, and it's very technical based, and technology is prevalent within our industry.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective. What would you guys consider kind of the entry level position on the shop floor? Is that an assembler? Would it be, what's kind of the progression for somebody that somebody goes through between, it could be welding and actually programming and into engineering?
You know, I'll just relate it to myself because that's about the easiest. You know, coming in as a press brake operator, I had very little press brake experience coming into Muza, and working my way through, and ended up leading one of our second shift groups for about 8 years. So if you put forth the most effort that you can, right, you can start anywhere within the shop in advance. I've seen people come through when I was in operations management, come through early on and start off at our laser sort table, right, then transition into a press brake, and then transition into supervisor roles and things of that nature. Of course, there's going to be training on the backside, internal as well as external. It's going to have to happen. So I think that's important to understand. But really, you can start anywhere within manufacturing, and your end game is what you make it.
Yeah.
Right. So
yep.
if you put forth the effort and you have a goal in place, and it might not necessarily be, okay, I want to be in sales or I want to be an engineer. Just take forth of every opportunity and make the most out of it to grow that. So that's really what, from a skills gap standpoint, when you're talking about growing your own welders and things of that nature, and having technical based training that's within a facility like we do, it's so important, you know.
Yeah, it's really, so it sounds like it's creating that path for opportunity, and also finding people that want to progress within that path. Yeah.
And that's huge, you know, at 3% unemployment around that area, right, in this region, it's definitely a constraint to grow a business. So oftentimes you're taking those culture fit folks that are rock stars in one area, and they have ambition to grow their skill set, you know, and then investing time into those folks, and helping them with a roadmap to get to where they want to be. Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. So you guys really serve a vast array of end markets. Could be power generation, you know, power distribution, military, automotive. I mean,
don't forget lighting.
Yeah, you've got some lighting customers. What are some of the cool things that you guys see happening in those different end markets, and some of the kind of the different things that you guys have incorporated into your manufacturing processes to serve some of these markets?
A lot of things over the years, the 20 plus years that I've been in the business, like I said, talking about that full value add side.
Yeah.
Gone are the days where customers are vertically integrated.
Yeah.
Although some of them still are, and they choose
Sure.
to be, and that's great. That's perfect. But you see a lot of a shift of folks thinking about that, and they're hurting for folks as well, right?
Mhm.
So when you're talking about an employee standpoint, so you see a lot of that value added coming into our doors, which makes sense. You know, we brought on in the mid 2000s brought on a machining company, a machining division,
Sure.
as well as robotic welding. So it made sense to grow the value added transition there. Fast forward to current state where we also have that full value added assembly. So we're not just making one part for a certain organization and shipping out, and they're putting it into a full assembly. We're making that entire assembly, painting it, assembling it, putting additional technology into it. Then it ships out to their walls.
So it's actually drop shipping.
In
right,
some
cases.
Some cases it
Yeah.
does. It will drop ship right into the end user's hand, which is
Mhm.
pretty awesome, pretty remarkable. I sit back and look at some of our operations that we do now compared to 18 years ago, 19 years ago, and it's pretty outstanding. I get pretty excited about seeing that transition because it opens up the door for thought and provokes that for the future, right?
Yeah.
What else can we do? Hey, we're this far. Why can't we take it even a couple steps further?
One of the perspectives we have is, we work with electronics vendors, we work with metal fabrication vendors, casting companies, stamping companies.
Right.
And one of the big differences that I see between the electronics vendors and some of the metal vendors is the electronics folks are used to vendor managed inventory.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the kind of value added services that, they had to implement, many, many years ago. Do you guys see getting into that, or having stock, more or less becoming a warehouse of some kind for certain customers, just to eliminate that shipping time, unpacking, reship, assemble,
Right.
Have a more efficient path to the end market?
Right.
Have you done any of that?
We do work on programs
Yep.
with some of our customers in the electronic distribution field, things
Yep.
of that nature, right? So where it makes sense,
Mhm.
if we can work out a program where it takes off inventory from our shoulders and also alleviates it from their docks as well, and it's a win-win, then we'll take a look at that stuff. It makes perfect sense to align with those options as you're looking at the volume of product. If you're
Mhm.
talking about onesies and twosies, we're not
It's
going to look
tough.
at that stuff.
Yeah.
When you're talking about large volume where we can always have stuff in process,
Yep.
it makes sense to talk about that. And that's really when you talk about our solutions based, right? It just doesn't revolve around that one part. It revolves around the entire solution. So supply chain as well. So really talking about what's needed on a weekly demand on the lines, a daily demand, and how can we best fit the solution around that.
Cool. Well, geographically, do you serve primarily customers in Wisconsin or the Midwest, or do you guys reach out to the entire U.S.?
The entire U.S.
Yep.
currently. So we have customers California, the Southeast, throughout. So we do have a strong customer base in Wisconsin as well. And I don't think we'll ever get away from that just because
Yeah.
of the face-to-face. I mean, it's
That's
extremely
important in the
right?
sales
And-
process for sure.
Right, and as well as with our customers that are further reach, we can easily hop on a plane
Yeah.
and be down there, right? I mean, right now the market, the nationwide global market is huge. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no problem with hopping on a flight, getting in front of people, if that state's the case.
So what do you enjoy most about your sales and business development role?
I enjoy connecting with people.
Yeah.
I enjoy that aspect. I've always been a people person. When I was first talked to about moving into a sales role, I kind of thought they were nuts.
Did you have to be sold on it?
A little bit, yeah, right, ironically. But Chuck Alipo, a senior director at our facility, at our campus, one of our great mentors that we have, he sat me down, we talked a little bit, and he said, well, you can talk to a wall. That's true. And, but even more importantly, you know what we do and you know what we can't do, and what doesn't fit us. So I enjoy the problem-solving aspect of it as well, based around that, right? Getting in and taking a look at an actual part and an assembly and understand, okay, how can we do it and how can we add value that may be making the product better at the end customer, and through their assembly process and things of that nature. Really just I love that problem-solving aspect. And I don't think that's anything that will ever go away from me soon. That's something that's in my blood and what I do on the weekends and things like that, right? So
serves you well as an operations manager or a press brake operator or a salesperson, right?
Right.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So I know you had a few other topics you wanted to run through. Some of it around challenges that Wisconsin manufacturers are going through, and also some of the career opportunities and partnerships with some of the schools, or anything else we want to touch on those topics.
From an operations standpoint, it's important for the younger generation to understand that manufacturing isn't dirty grimy, like I mentioned, right? So when you get into fabrication and there's plenty of different roles in that area, from welding, press brake operators, laser operators. Then from the support roles, you're talking about engineers and programmers, things of that nature, right? So it goes past that, even from the support role, from accounting and all those logistical aspects. So there's a lot of, just in the metal fab arena in any business, a lot of different needs that all businesses have. So it doesn't stop in the fabrication world either.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for people that, as you mentioned, want to get involved with a company that has a path for progression and then has a tight-knit culture. Those are important. Right. So do you see, have you guys done much with 3D printing, or do you see that as a complementary technology or a competing technology? I know we have some vendors that are 3D printing plastic tools for stamping processes, or and I know it's a bit of a buzzword and it's kind of misunderstood within a manufacturing setting, but how do you view 3D printing over the next decade?
I think I would love to have one in our prototype lab.
Yeah.
I think that would be the next wave of the future, without a doubt. I mean, well, not even the wave of the future, it's here, right?
Yeah.
So you look at the technology, and if you can make a trinket that goes into application to replicate a metal product, and half the time, why not give it a shot, right? So things of that nature. I think it's great technology. I could see us getting into it at some point. It's just going to aid with, especially in that prototype world, it's going to aid our process there.
So that's probably the first place it'll enter is on the prototyping stage.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. For us.
Yeah, and I wonder, from a spec standpoint, a lot of the alloys and the components that you purchase or we purchase, they have to meet a certain alloy and spec, and I wonder how that's going to play out. How you go from powdered metal to you meeting an ANSI spec of some kind.
Yeah, I don't know how that would play out at all. That's a good thought.
Well, Mike, anything else you want to touch on? It was we covered a few different things.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Thank
you for the opportunity to come down and have a discussion with you.
Yeah, we want to have you back.
Great.
All right,
Sounds
awesome.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.